In 2021, researchers Ralph Philippe Wyman and Benedikt Schmolze demonstrated an absolutely beautiful remote zero-click exploit against a fully up-to-date and patched Tesla. They put their exploit on a quadcopter drone, and the drone just needed to fly within range of a vulnerable car to exploit it, pop the doors, and take it over. How do the world's best hackers unearth zero-day vulnerabilities like this? There are really 3 steps. And once you understand them, you are in a much better place to improve the security of your systems and make your development methodologies more proactive. Step 1, map out the attack surface. Step 2, find a new vulnerability and develop an initial proof of concept exploit. Step 3, weaponize that exploit. Hi, I'm David Brumley, CEO of ForAllSecure and a tenured full professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering and by courtesy Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon University. I'd like to emphasize that this video is separate from my official academic role. It is, however, part of my effort to provide free information on offensive cybersecurity and building safer, more secure software to the world. In this video, I want to share with you the methodologies and practice of exploiting on-vehicle systems in particular and cyber-physical systems in general. As we dig in, I'll share how these steps work and we'll recreate portions of the 2021 Tesla exploit you just saw together. Let's dig in. The first step in offense is to understand the attack surface. The term attack surface refers to the collection of all possible points where an unauthenticated attacker might attempt to gain initial access. On a car, this includes user-facing services like the Wi-Fi hotspot, Bluetooth, and LTE connections. Once you understand that surface, you then trace different possible attack paths from the surface to ultimately taking over the car. To do that, we need to talk about the overall car architecture. The modern car is essentially a distributed compute environment. On this network are potentially hundreds of individual computers called electronic control units, or ECUs for short. ECUs like the NXP S32K3 are small, complete computers with onboard processors, memory, and network interfaces. Typically, I think of them like a Raspberry Pi with some additional certifications for automotive use. The modern network car uses 2 different networks connected together via a gateway. The first network is the front-end network, which hosts ECUs for modern infotainment, connectivity, and telemetry. The front end is what actually provides the Wi-Fi hotspot, Bluetooth, and LTE services to you and to the rest of the car. Front-end ECUs communicate over Ethernet and typically run a Linux or a Linux-like system. The second on-car network is the back-end, which connects more specialized ECUs like those that manage your seatbelts and airbags and actually control the car. ECUs on the back-end often run an embedded OS like VxWorks and typically communicate using a CAN or CAN-FD protocol. For example, the back-end airbag ECU may want to tell the door ECU to unlock and then request the front-end contact emergency services to send help to you. The gateway connects the 2 different networks together and also provides some firewall capabilities. The front end is user-facing, the back end typically has safety-critical components, and the gateway's firewall functionality adds some defense in depth between these 2 domains, but by no means should be considered foolproof. In the Tesla hack, the researchers focused on the Central Information Display, or CID, running on the front end. The CID is Tesla's way of providing infotainment and telemetry and remote access to the overall car all in one. The researchers focused in on a CID application called Conman, short for Connection Manager. Conman is a Linux app that provides DHCP, HTTP, Whisper, and several other services. I want to emphasize that Conman is not a Tesla-specific program. In fact, half the automotive industry uses Conman, and it's the reference implementation on automotive frameworks such as automotive-grade Linux and Genevi. Step 2. Find a new vulnerability and generate a proof of concept exploit. Once the researchers identified Conman, they looked up known vulnerabilities, but there hadn't been one in over 4 years. Does that mean it's safe though? No. The researchers just needed to find a new zero-day. Now, elite vulnerability researchers use an algorithm I call test like a hacker. It was first described to me by a hacker named George Hotz. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because he did the first iPhone jailbreak when he was just 17 and went on to find 0 days against the Sony PlayStation and every major browser. I've since talked to dozens of other elite hackers, and they all follow essentially the same algorithm. The algorithm has 3 steps, and they are: first, look for the happy and tested code paths. Skip these. They're well tested and likely everything works. Second, identify untested or under-tested code. This is where the risk lies. Third, write tests for that untested code. Wait, hold up. Why write tests? We're looking for vulnerabilities. Well, the reason is an exploit is just a test case for the unexpected. In particular, a proof of concept exploit needs to demonstrate that vulnerable code exists and that the vulnerable code is reachable. A test case does just that. Attackers work smarter, not harder. Now, simply brute forcing through all the different code paths manually is expensive, error-prone, and unscalable. Instead, attackers often use dynamic analysis to automatically help them explore code and find new vulnerabilities, with coverage-based fuzzing being the most popular technique. Let's dive into the Tesla code and reproduce the initial POV with Mayhem. Mayhem, in addition to fuzzing, runs a more advanced dynamic analysis called symbolic execution. Symbolic execution translates code paths into mathematical formulas and then solves those formulas to drive further execution. Mayhem also performs tasks like vulnerability diagnosis, triage reporting, and regression testing. Mayhem takes in the app inside a Docker container. Why Docker? Well, really there are 2 reasons. First, Docker allows Mayhem to scale analysis by utilizing multiple CPU cores. Second, reproducibility and accuracy. When Mayhem creates a proof of concept exploit, it checks that it reproduces in the exact Docker environment it used for analysis. That means you never get a false positive, since you can always reproduce the exploit yourself. After you tell Mayhem where your Docker container is at, you click Go. Behind the scenes, Mayhem allocates a worker node to perform analysis, identifies which code has already been tested, and then starts authoring new tests. As Mayhem runs, it gets deeper and deeper into the application, increasing your overall code coverage. In fact, we've had one customer use Mayhem to meet up to 80% of their compliance required coverage needs on applications. If and when a vulnerability is found, Mayhem triages the underlying bug and records the proof of concept exploit. When the developer creates a patch, they can ask Mayhem to replay the proof of concept exploit and the saved test suite. That replay ensures the vulnerability is really fixed and that there aren't any regressions where previously working code breaks. The Tesla hack was primarily due to a typical buffer overflow vulnerability. When Conman receives a DHCP reply, it calls an uncompress routine and copies the uncompressed data to a new buffer. However, the program does not perform sufficient bounds checking, which an attacker can use to perform a full control flow hijack exploit. That leads us to step 3, weaponize. The initial proof of concept demonstrated the vulnerability, but didn't provide an end-to-end exploit that owned the overall car. To get there, the researchers had to solve at least 2 problems. One problem was the Conman vulnerability could only be triggered via DHCP, so the researchers needed to get the Tesla to make a DHCP request to a device they controlled. They discovered Teslas will automatically attach to any Tesla service access point and solve the DHCP problem by impersonating that access point on their quadcopter drone. Second, Conman was built with several application security defenses enabled, such as address space layout randomization and stack cookies. These defenses make it more difficult to initially weaponize a proof of concept into a full system hijack. The researchers were able to bypass these mitigations by finding and utilizing several other low-severity vulnerabilities. For example, they found a way to bypass stack canaries and another vulnerability they could use to leak address space layout randomization secrets. The full exploit, as I said, was and is a thing of beauty. The drone advertises a fake Tesla service access point using credentials scraped from the underlying firmware. Well, actually, those credentials were also posted in Twitter, but you could find them in the firmware. When the Tesla attaches to the drone, the car requests a DHCP address, and the drone provides a malicious reply. The malicious reply exploits the conman vulnerability and creates a remote shell back to the drone. At that point, the drone can send arbitrary commands to the car, like to open the doors. Game over. The 2021 Tesla hack illustrates 3 takeaways. First, the safety-critical parts of the system are usually not the entry point. Instead, attackers compromise something else and then pivot to the safety-critical components. Therefore, if we want to secure our vehicles and our cyber-physical systems, we need to identify those entry vectors and spend more time checking them. In cars, that empirically means we should focus more attention on infotainment and telemetry. Second, test like a hacker. Overall, we recommend that application security programs have 2 parts: a reactive component that detects known vulnerabilities, like an SBOM, and a proactive component like Mayhem that finds unknown vulnerabilities. Third, and I think just as important as the first 2, defenders do have some advantages over attackers. Attackers have to map out the attack surface from scratch, reverse engineer firmware, and figure out how to circumvent exploit mitigations. Defenders don't need to do all that. As defenders, we know what's exposed on the network, we have better access to the code we put on our systems, and creating a cool demo just isn't and shouldn't be necessary to get a vulnerability fixed. We should take advantage of this, spend our time building better CI/CD pipelines, doing more software-in-the-loop testing, and putting more time into finding new vulnerabilities and squashing them before attackers. So that's it. How to hack a car. If you enjoyed this, please share, click like, and subscribe below.